Welcome to The Explainer. Have you ever stopped to think about what really happens when you send a text or make a call? It feels like magic, right? Well, today we're going to pull back the curtain and follow one tiny piece of information on its absolutely incredible invisible journey through the wireless world.
All right, let's jump right in. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, you got to understand the fundamental trade-off here. Think about your internet at home. It's wired, right? That physical cable gives you super high bandwidth. It's stable, it's consistent, but you're stuck in one place. Mobile networks flip that script entirely. They say, forget the cable, we'll give you freedom. But that freedom comes at a cost. Lower bandwidth that's, constantly changing depending on where you are. It's a classic trade of stability for mobility.
So, here's the game plan for our journey. First, we'll talk about the big idea of being wireless. Then, we'll dive into how the entire planet got covered by this invisible cellular grid. After that, we'll check out the magic that keeps your call from dropping when you're on the move, the handoff. Then, we'll see how data, the internet, got shoehorned into this system. We'll look at a super clever trick for dealing with bad connections. And finally, we'll zoom out and see the whole wireless world your phone lives in.
Okay, first up, let's get to the core of it all. What's the big idea behind going wireless? What's the promise and what's the big challenge? You see this phrase everywhere, anywhere, anytime. And honestly, it sounds like just a marketing slogan, but it's so much more than that. This is the guiding principle, the North Star for decades of insane engineering. The entire goal, the whole reason this all exists, is to give you access to information without being literally plugged into a wall. Okay, so you want to provide a wireless signal to the entire planet. How in the world do you do that? I mean, you can't just build one giant antenna, right? It wouldn't work. The only way to tackle a problem that big is to break it down. You have to slice up the world into tiny, manageable pieces. And that right there, that's why we call them cell phones. It's because the network is made up of all these little cells. When you're making a call, you're not beaming a signal up to a satellite in space. Nope. You're just having a very local conversation with a nearby tower, a base station that sits in the middle of its own little geographic cell. Think of that tower as your personal on-ramp to the huge global network.
So this creates this really cool problem. It's basically a giant geometry puzzle for the entire planet. If you're going to cover the whole world with these cells, you need a shape that can fit together perfectly, like tiles on a floor, with absolutely no gaps. So what's the best shape for the job?
Okay, so there are three main rules for this puzzle. Rule 1, no gaps. A gap means a dropped call, a dead zone. No good. Rule 2, no overlaps. If cells overlap, their signals interfere with each other, causing a total mess. And Rule 3, for the sake of, money and efficiency, each cell needs to cover the biggest possible area.
So you run the numbers. What shape meets all those criteria? Well, circles are out. They leave all these weird gaps between them. Squares, they tile perfectly, right? But they don't cover the most area for their perimeter. And then you have the hexagon. And it turns out the hexagon is the absolute perfect mathematical champion. It tiles perfectly with no gaps, and it gives you the most bang for your buck in terms of coverage area. And that, right there, is why the world is secretly covered in a massive invisible grid of hexagons. Kinda cool, right?
Okay, but think about it. You're not standing still. You're in a car, on a train, just walking down the street. So what happens when you're on a call and you move from one of these invisible hexagons into the next one? Well, this is where the real magic of the cellular network kicks in. It's a process called the handoff.
The best way to think of a handoff is like a baton pass in a super high-stakes relay race. Your connection is the baton, and the cell towers are the runners. The network has to perfectly pass your call from one tower to the next so seamlessly that you don't even notice. Because if they fumble that pass for even a fraction of a second, your call drops. Game over.
So the idea is pretty simple, right? As you move away from Tower A, the signal gets weaker. At the same time, the signal from Tower B, the one you're heading towards, gets stronger. The network sees this happening and just switches you over. Simple in theory. But the real genius is in how it makes that switch.
It turns out there are two main flavors of handoff. The first is called a hard handoff. Think of it as break, then make. For just a tiny fraction of a second, the network drops your connection to the old tower before it connects you to the new one. It's faster, it's cheaper, but there's a small risk of dropping the call. The other way is a soft handoff, which is make, then break.
Here, the network connects you to the new tower before it lets go of the old one. So for a split second, you're actually connected to both towers at once. It's way smoother, no risk of a drop, but it's more complex and uses more network resources. All right, everything we've talked about so far, cells, handoffs, it was all designed for one thing, voice calls. But let's be real, the thing that changed everything, the reason you have a supercomputer in your pocket, was the internet. So how did they cram the entire internet onto a network built for talking? Let's find out. This little equation here, GPRS equals GSM plus data, looks simple, but it represents a gigantic leap for technology. The first mainstream mobile data was something called GPRS, General Packet Radio Service. And the brilliant thing about it was, they didn't have to build a whole new network from scratch. Instead, they built a clever data layer that just sat right on top of the existing voice network, which was called GSM. But to handle data instead of just voice, the network needed some new, smarter components. It's like they hired new managers. When your phone sends data, it still goes to the local base station. But from there, it gets sent to these two new pieces of equipment. The first is the SGSN. Think of it as your personal account manager. It handles your authentication, your data session. Then, the SGSN passes your data to the GGSN. The GGSN is like the security guard at the main gate to the internet. It's the final gateway that routes your data out into the wild. These two guys are the traffic cops for the entire mobile internet. Okay, now we hit a massive roadblock. See, the internet was built on a protocol called TCP. And TCP was designed for nice, stable, wired connections. It has one simple rule. If a packet of data gets lost on its journey, TCP assumes the whole road is jammed with traffic, and it panics. It yells, "Everyone, slow down," and throttles the connection. But here's the thing. On a wireless network, packets get lost all the time. Not because the network is congested, but just because you walked behind a thick wall. This was a huge problem.
So you see the challenge, right? How do you stop your phone with its temporary, fleeky connection from freaking out a server on the other side of the planet and making it slow everything down? You have to somehow shield the stable, wired internet from the messy, chaotic reality of the wireless world. And the solution they came up with is just brilliant. It's called snooping TCP. The idea is don't let that distant server on the internet even know there's a problem. Instead, you turn the local cell tower, the one your phone is talking to, into a kind of local manager. This tower snoops on your connection. It watches everything, and if it sees a packet get lost, it fixes a problem itself, right then and there, locally. Here is how this clever trick works. First, the cell tower holds on to a copy of every data packet it sends to your phone for just a moment. It then listens for your phone to send back a little acknowledgement, like a tiny "got it" for each packet. If the tower doesn't get that "got it" message back, it knows the packet was lost in transit, so it immediately resends its own local copy. This all happens so fast that the original server way back on the internet has no idea an error ever occurred. It's like having a helpful assistant right next to you, fixing typos before your boss ever sees the email. All right, to wrap up our journey, let's take a big step back. We've been laser focused on the cellular connection, the thing that gives you that anywhere internet. But your phone isn't a one-trick pony. It's actually a master juggler of a whole bunch of different wireless technologies. And this really shows you the whole picture. Think of your phone as being in the center of its own personal wireless bubble. Each technology has a very specific job. Cellular, your 4G or 5G, that's your long-range workhorse. It covers kilometers. Then you've got Wi-Fi for that super fast, high-bandwidth connection when you're at home or in a cafe, good for about 100 meters. Then you zoom in even closer, and you have Bluetooth, perfect for connecting your headphones or your smartwatch just a few meters away. And you might even be using things like Zigbee for your smart home devices, which are designed to sip power. Your phone is the conductor of this entire orchestra. So when you think about it, this whole journey is pretty incredible. We went from a system designed just to let you make a phone call while walking, a call that seamlessly hops between invisible hexagons, all the way to this complex ecosystem of connected devices in our pockets. It really makes you wonder, what's the next step? As our world gets more and more connected, with everything from our cars to our refrigerators coming online, which one of these technologies is going to define our future? That's a question worth thinking about. Thanks for coming along on this journey with us here at The Explainer.